Well, thank God it's Friday. Thank God it's Friday. TGIF. Welcome to the Friday edition of the show Morning Spring on Western Spring Television. My name is Emmanuel Ojadegele. It's good to have you end your week with us as you started it with us on the show. We're reaching you live from StarTimes channel 190 on the DTT platform, but you can follow us on all our social media handles, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and of course, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel at Western Spring Television so you can follow us live and also enjoy recaps and catch up with all the episodes of the programs that you've missed on this channel. Welcome once again to the weekend edition. It's Friday, actually. You're welcome to the show this morning.
Yeah, thanks for joining us on the Friday edition of the Morning Spring on Western Spring Television. I'm Temitope Ajijola. Good morning.
Oh, well, so you know what we already do for you if you've been following the program, but if you're joining us for the first time, here we'll bring you newspaper analysis. We look at topical issues with our guests, and at the same time, we tell you who and what is trending on social media, why they are trending, and what people are saying about the who, the what, and the why. So we'll take a break as usual, and when we come back, it'll be time to look at the papers. So stay with us. Okay, so welcome back to the show Morning Spring. Time for the newspaper segment. We begin with the Punch newspaper this morning. The Punch is where we start off our discussion of the national dailies. National Assembly leadership, Tinubu governors dump consensus for zoning. That's on page 2. Tinubu governors dump consensus for zoning. And the writers say governors advise Tinubu against endorsing candidates, seek due process. The other writer that says work with party leadership for principal officers election, and Tinubu tells governors. And that's what you see now, the governors and president-elect have dumped the consensus agreement, and instead they've opted for a zoning. They rotating as they've been doing the positions between different geopolitical zones, sometimes religion and tribe and ethnicity. So that I don't know, there were reports that they were adopting a Christian candidate for both the speaker and the Senate president, but now we don't know what the zoning will be like. Maybe the party itself will in no time come out and tell us. But it's good that the presidential candidate has been told to not, the president-elect has been told to avoid endorsing any candidates. Yeah.
It's very good that he was told not to. It's important to, separate himself from all of this politics at the moment and allow the party leadership, to take over there. Very important.
Very important there. But away from that, you can see pictures of President Buhari attending some of the armed forces parades.
Yes.
And the story there is over 60,000 soldiers recruited under my watch, says Buhari.
Yeah.
Over 60,000 soldiers recruited under my watch, according to the president. Well, we must commend the armed forces for their fight against insurgents and insurgency. It's not been an easy one. It's been they've been faced with so many challenges, but they've been able to surmount some of them to really deal a huge blow to some of the terrorists. But then it's good to see that 60,000, that's between 2015 and now, 60,000 persons have joined.
I sort of have a different view to this. If in 8 years we had 60,000 soldiers recruited, somehow I didn't feel it. I didn't feel that 60,000 soldiers were added to the ones we had on ground. That's one. And two, what sort of training were they given? I mean, did they have enough ammunition to have combated the insurgency and all of that? Those are issues that we need to look at. It's not enough to just recruit soldiers. What backing did you give them? What artillery did they have in their, within their reach to combat that, or their lives were also endangered. So those are issues that needed to have been looked into, or that he needs to answer now, despite, the recruitment. It's good that you took people off the streets, that you had people, hired, but you need to hire them as well as also look at, the hazards of the job. Very important.
Yes, of course. And $2.4 billion diversion claim baseless. It's coming from Abubakar Malami, saying the allegations of the diversion of some funds to the tune of 2.4 billion naira is baseless. Page 16 and page 3. Nigerians rejoice as police go after rogue cops. Nigerians rejoice as police go after rogue cops.
I think yesterday we saw that some, I think maybe 3 or 2 were demoted or something, and then others too were dealt with. It's a good thing that Nigeria police is looking into aspects of wrong things happening in the institution, and giving out punishment where it's necessary. The Nigerians are right to rejoice with that.
Okay, so let's move on. 16 states eye federal government relief fund. 34 on the page 34 of the Punch newspaper. Floods. 16 states eye federal government relief fund.
It's on page 34.
There's been so many warnings from relevant agencies talking about the fact that we'll have more than usual flood this time and all of that. But it's not just about the fund, the relief fund. I don't think that's what states should be focusing on. They also should be focusing on trying to mitigate the effect of the flooding, reduce it, try and do everything possible to ensure that it's not as disastrous as it's been predicted to be.
Very true.
Above the nameplate, federal government plans supplementary budget as National Executive Council suspends subsidy removal. That's on page 29. At page 29, the NEC has suddenly somehow says it's no longer implementing the removal of subsidy. Has put a pin in that, and now they're planning a supplementary budget. Page 29.
Now the question will be the pay rise that was approved. Is it still go? Are they still going to go ahead with, the payment of the pay? Of the increment, or they're going to suspend that too, and all of the adjoining issues.
And then the $800 million.
Yes.
That was taken as a grant or as a loan.
Yeah. So they're going to return it. Yes. That's another question. Are they going to return it to wherever it is they borrowed that from?
Oh, interesting days ahead. Very interesting days. Rescued Nigerian student arrive Egypt, await airlift. That's on page 7. And PDP, Labour Party, lost poll to overconfidence, says Buhari. Wow, first time Buhari will be commenting on the election that I know of. I've not heard him say anything about political parties and their participation. He's always just been talking about the process and how it went. But hearing him say that he lost the poll to overconfidence, some might disagree, some may agree. But that's the president's position on the matter. It's on page 40.
I'm glad about the way the Punch has put it here, because I was just seeing another, the face of another paper that said something about, what Buhari said, but it didn't even give us an insight. But this is giving us an insight into what he has said about losing a poll to overconfidence. Well, to get more on that story thing, let's check page 40 of the Punch newspaper.
And that's all on the Punch this morning.
Well, on the Nation newspaper, it says, why Tinubu flawed Atiku Obi by President Buhari. And the writer says, President-elect urges governors to back party on National Assembly top positions. Well, we can hear, we have seen one of the points that was raised by the president as to why Tinubu floored Atiku and Obi. It says it is due to overconfidence on the parts of Atiku and Obi. Well, we'll see that on, in the story as you read, but it's on page 4 of the Nation newspaper. And it says overconfidence is creating more problems for the opposition. They are finding it hard to convince those who supported them from outside why they are unable to beat us. Well, he even included himself in
he's a member of the party.
Yes, and one of the leading figures there. Well, just below the nameplate, government justifies Nnamdi Kanu's repatriation from Kenya. Government justifies Nnamdi Kanu's repatriation from Kenya, and that is on page 5 of the Nation newspaper. And page 6 says, lover sets self ablaze. Well, we don't know why the lover has done that, but it's on page 6 of the Nation newspaper. And just below that, mixed reactions trail subsidy removal shift. Mixed reactions trail subsidy removal shift. NLC, LCCI, NECA, other state positions. That's on the subsidy removal. It's sure to have mixed reactions. We people, even the government should have envisaged that. It's going to have a lot of mixed reactions, and probably some actions taken in the coming days. It shouldn't be surprising that the NLC would have lots of actions to take.
Yes, and we'll be seeing different statements and positions recently.
Yes. And then to the bottom strip of the paper, 10 burnt in Plateau tanker accident. 10 burnt in Plateau tanker accident. That's another disheartening story on this Friday morning. And that is on page 6 of the Nation newspaper. And judgment reserved in OAU murder case. Judgment reserved in OAU murder case. On page 6, that's still the Adedoyin case. And it was revisited yesterday at the court. And says judgment reserved in OAU murder case. And before we go from the papers, just beside that picture, it says Buhari to spend retirement in Kaduna. If you've been wondering where your president will be or what he would be doing, he would be in Kaduna, spending his retirement there. That's to be continued on page 4 of the Nation newspaper. And just above the nameplate, 48 million barrel of crude oil not missing. Malami tells reps. 48 million barrel of crude oil not missing. Malami tells reps. And that is on page 4 of the Nation newspaper as well. And on page 27, Southwest states to launch regional power rail projects. Southwest states to launch regional power and rail projects. That is on page 27 of the Nation newspaper. And on page 3, Buhari says, we have done our best to improve security. Well, it would seem that the president has done his best with his cabinet members, but you might not think that his best has been enough, but he says he has done his best. And on page 5, UK Prime Minister Sunak pledges support for Tinubu administration. UK Prime Minister Sunak pledges support for Tinubu administration. That is all we have on the Nation newspaper.
All right, so we'll take a quick break now, and when we come back, we'll bring you the rest of the papers. To stay with us.
Gbadamosi Adegoke Adelabu was a prominent figure in Ibadan politics and Western region before Nigeria's independence. He was a key founder of the National Council of Nigeria and the Cameroons, a political party that held lofty the torch of liberty for the two West African countries. He carved a niche for himself as a wordsmith and a creative speaker. The nickname Kwenkele was a natively corrupted version of peculiar mess, his bombastic English language style often used to score proceedings at the parliament. The author of Africa in Ebullition, a handbook of freedom for Nigerian nationalists, was Nigeria's Federal Minister of Natural Resources and Social Services between 1955 and 1956. He died in an auto crash on the 25th March 1958 at the age of 42. Western Spring Television identifies Adegoke Adelabu as a watershed character in history. Born Jeremiah Oyeni Obafemi on March 6, 1905, Obafemi Awolowo was a prime architect of Nigeria's independence and most consummate advocate of free education and social welfare in Africa's most populous nation. Erudite politician, thinker and philosopher, Awo was fondly addressed by associates and political colleagues, brought his unique attributes to bear on governance in the defunct Western region. He administered as leader of government business and the premier between 1955 and 1958. Obafemi Awolowo's premiership witnessed pioneering in the multi-sectoral policy initiatives and execution. The Western region under his administration paraded several enviable records. First television station in Africa, first real estate in Nigeria, first high-rise building in Nigeria, first modern sports stadium in Nigeria, first agricultural settlement in Nigeria, first modern civil service secretariat in Nigeria, and first industrial estate in Nigeria. His face is on 100 Naira denomination as a mark of honor for his distinguished services to his country. Western Spring Television identifies Obafemi Awolowo.
Welcome back to the show Morning Spring on Western Spring Television. We're still taking the papers for you. So now let's go back to the newspapers. We'll resume with the Daily Trust papers now. The banner headline says, Tinubu settles for Akpabio Barrow as Senate President Deputy. The writers say to convey decision to NWC, other contenders. Meet APC governor, says let's work together on NAS leadership. North can't be second fiddle, former governor. Consultations ongoing for speaker, deputy positions. That's on page 4. Well, it has already begun. The back and forth. Tinubu settling for Akpabio Barrow as Senate President. Some zonings have apparently have reportedly been done. But you don't expect that all of that will be comfortable, for everyone else or convenient for them, yes?
Yes. You can already see a northern governor saying North can be second fiddle. A former governor.
So it's going to cause tensions within the party. It's going to make a lot of people, want to say different things and all of that. But let's see how the party will progress from it. And let's see if it will have any impact on the fabric of the party. Anyway, from that story, tanker explosion kills 13, injures many in Jos. Page 34. Tanker explosion kills many, kills 13 rather, injures many in Jos. That's in Jos. Page 7. My administration recruited 60,000 soldiers coming from President Muhammadu Buhari. Page 7. And on page 20, girl 8 tests HIV positive after mother's boyfriend raped her. Page 29. Another sad story there. You know, I really don't know what's going on
Terrible.
in this world.
Very terrible. I hope that man can be apprehended and brought to justice. No, just so that girl can get justice. But I don't know. He has possibly, he has even infected her already. And it's just sad. Very sad.
Right, bottom strip. Sudan crisis, 1,005 Nigerian evacuees to arrive Abuja today, coming from the federal government. 15 Nigerian evacuees to arrive Abuja today, the federal government. And the returnees abandoned in desert over pay hitches. Returnees abandoned in desert over pay hitches. Hundreds of Umrah pilgrims stranded in Saudi. It's on page 26.
I mean, I was watching that on one of the TVs, and it was so sad that they were stranded at all in a desert. But if it's overpay hitches, as the Daily Trust has put it here, it's even more sad because you said about 560 something million naira was earmarked for this evacuation. And what pay hitches could there have been? Was the money not enough? What happened? Like, the federal government needs to give, a proper explanation for this, so we can know, and have first-hand information as to what happened, why they were stranded in a desert in the first place. But it's also good news to see that 1,500 of them would arrive Abuja today. Hope that they get here safe and that they can see their families, safely as well.
We hope that they arrive safely. Now, above the banner headline below the Premier League, the Daily Trust now nameplate presidency to youths. You can relocate abroad for better opportunity. Wow, that's a new one. You can relocate abroad for better opportunities.
Well, I think that this is just a statement, because it should be the presidency still meddling in the affairs of some of these workers too, who are getting jobs over there and moving, trying to you're telling a certain government not to take them up again, not to accept them into the system again. Now you're telling youths that they can relocate abroad for better opportunities. I hope you're not saying this and you're sabotaging their movement, in a way, somewhat at all, because this is just looking like a statement to me. It's not looking like it's something they mean. But it's on page 17. Youths can check it out and see if it's something they can work towards.
Okay, moving on. Federal government suspends fuel subsidy removal. This is on page 23. Federal government suspends fuel subsidy removal. And then
that's got to be one of the biggest news of the years. Stories on the basis of the papers today. It's because it's something that is touching everyone. We've already moved past the fact that they borrowed money for the palliative in the first place. I mean, that has been the case, just after they announced that. But people have already gotten used to the idea of the palliative, and now they're going to use it to cushion the effect of the subsidy removal. Now it's been suspended. They're taking the mouse back again. It's just one of the news of the day.
It's one of the news, and we expect to see multiple reactions in the coming days. Well, it's happening on the weekend, so till Monday before you get to. Monday is a public holiday. Yes, and so we'll see. Okay, so page 37. Federal government says no vaccination. as poultry farmers lose 3.4 million birds to flu. No vaccination as poultry farmers lose 3.4 million birds to flu. God help us. God help those farmers. And I hope that the government can come through for them.
God helps this country. Look at the floods that we got warning for at the beginning of the year. We can see it already blowing up in our faces, seeing floods everywhere. And one of the papers is saying that governors are eyeing the relief fund, but governors are not eyeing, the importance of working towards not having their citizens, stranded at all before you even talk about relief funds. But I just think that's what they're there for, just to get, relief from whatever it is that is happening. I mean, in a very negative way to their citizens. You want to benefit from the woes of your citizens. It's a very bad one. It's a very bad one. And here, probably because they were not warned, there is bird flu now. And then the federal government is saying no vaccination, and poultry farmers are losing. And look at what they've lost, 3.4 million birds already. We don't know how many more will be lost, or how grievous this would be if it was spread from a certain zone to another. So it's really sad that we have this case on our hands. But that's all on the Daily Trust, and let's move on quickly to the Guardian newspaper. The Guardian newspaper says Nigeria's drug crisis hits 500 billion naira worth of seizures yearly. Nigeria's drug crisis hits 500 billion naira worth of seizures yearly. And it says it's a big story, and it's on pages 4 and 5 of the Guardian newspaper. And you can see the drug analysis that the Guardian has put here just beside that story. And you can get it on pages 4 and 5 of the Guardian newspaper. And then just above that story, after $800 million palliative, federal government suspends subsidy, cites wrong timing. After $800 million palliative, federal government suspends subsidy, cites wrong timing. And that is on page 6 of the Guardian newspaper. Imagine that. You've already set the ball rolling. You've gone ahead to borrow that money, Emmanuel. You've already told people how you're going to, their salaries and all of that. And now you're saying that it is wrong timing. You didn't know before that it was going to be the wrong timing. This is some of the things we've been talking about implementations, about bringing policies forth without thinking it through, mapping out how it's going to work, the short and long-term effects on people, the consequences of these actions. And, well, more of that story, like I said earlier, is on page 6 of the Guardian newspaper. And below that, APC crisis, Lukman drags Adamu to court over alleged breach of party constitution. That's on page 6 as well. And it's an APC crisis. And on page 3, Malami Knox Reps says claims of illegal $2.4 billion oil sale false. Claims that the claim is false. That is on page 3 of the Guardian newspaper. And to the bottom strip, which is the last story there on the Guardian, on page 3, Sudan crisis, confusion, logistic hurdles, trail evacuation. Confusion, logistic hurdles, trail evacuation. And that's all we have on the Guardian and on the newspaper review segment this morning.
All right. Thank you for staying with us on the papers, the newspaper review segment. We'll go on another break, and by the time we come back, we'll be ready to have our guest for you in the studio. Stay with us.
The name Adolf Hitler exudes a gale of bile from millions of people who were victims of his autocratic rule and love, from fanatical supporters of his imperial aggression. Born April 20, 1889, at a small Austrian town sandwiched between Austro-German frontier, Adolf Hitler spent most of his childhood in Linz, the capital of Upper Austria. As a very prominent stakeholder in the horrific events of conflicts in Europe, Adolf Hitler could simply go off as the sole mover of the Second World War. 40 million Jews were murdered in the gas chambers of various Nazi camps on the orders of Adolf Hitler. Thousands of Adolf Hitlers still live in Germany today, but the majority of them are elderly and were named before the end of the Second World War. As the name pales into vanishing rarity, 13 children, according to official records, were named Adolf Hitler between 2006 and 2013. Western Spring Television identifies Adolf Hitler as a major character in history. Gbadamosi Adegoke Adelabu was a prominent figure in Ibadan politics and Western region before Nigeria's independence. He was a key founder of the National Council of Nigeria and the Cameroons, a political party that held lofty the torch of liberty for the two West African countries. He carved a niche for himself as a wordsmith and a creative speaker. The nickname Kwenkele Mens was a natively corrupted version of Peculiar Mess, his bombastic English language style often used to score proceedings at the parliament. The author of Africa in Ebullition, a handbook of freedom for Nigerian nationalists, was Nigeria's Federal Minister of Natural Resources and Social Services between 1955 and 1956. He died in an auto crash on the 25th March 1958 at the age of 42. Western Spring Television identifies Adegoke Adelabu as a watershed character in history. Born Jeremiah Oyeni Obafemi on March 6, 1905, Obafemi Awolowo was a prime architect of Nigeria's independence and most consummate advocate of free education and social welfare in Africa's most populous nation. Erudite politician, thinker and philosopher, Awo was fondly addressed by associates and political colleagues, brought his unique attributes to bear on governance in the defunct Western region. He administered as leader of government business and the premier between 1955 and 1958. Obafemi Awolowo's premiership witnessed pioneering in multi-sectoral policy initiatives and execution. The Western region under his administration paraded several enviable records. First television station in Africa, first real estate in Nigeria, first high-rise building in Nigeria, first modern sports stadium in Nigeria, first agricultural settlement in Nigeria, first modern civil service secretariat in Nigeria, and first industrial estate in Nigeria. His face is on 100 naira denomination as a mark of honor for his distinguished services to his country. Western Spring Television identifies Obafemi Awolowo as a major character in history. Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela was an anti-apartheid activist who gave his all for the elimination of what has been described as the world's most vicious rule of the unjust and man's inhumanity against man. He was born July 18, 1918 in Mvezo, South Africa. Educated and trained as a successful legal practitioner, he took up the gauntlet of a human activist against segregation by the minority white supremacists in South Africa. At the climax of his trial for treason, orchestrated by the minority South African government, the great crusader for democratic equality was prepared to pay the supreme sacrifice to establish majority rule in his native land. He told white jurists that if achieving freedom for his people was worth his life, he was prepared to die. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in Robben Island, described as the most notorious prison in the world. It was from this same prison that he came out as a free man to assume office as South Africa's first black president in 1994. Western Spring Television identifies Nelson Mandela as a watershed character in history. James Ajibolaige was a lawyer who obtained his first degree in classics from Nigeria's premier University of Ibadan. Born September 13, 1930, the orator and the polyglot spoke impeccable English, French, Igbo, Hausa, and Yoruba languages. His fine diction placed him among classical orators and public speakers like Cicero, the Roman orator. This attribute earned him the prefix Cicero of Esauke. He authored Kaduna Boy, an autobiography, Detainee's Diary, Constitution, and the People, among 6 other books. Bolaige was a colorful politician, elected governor of Oyo State in 1979 and appointed a federal minister in 1999. He was a pioneer founder of Afenifere, the Yoruba social, cultural, and political group. he invested his political sagacity to propel the group to the height of political leadership and decision-making in the southwest of Nigeria. Bola Ige was assassinated on the 23rd December 2001. His murderers are yet to be apprehended till today. Western Spring Television identifies Bola Ige as a watershed character in history. Ahmadu Bello, a Prince Royal, was born 6th of December 1910 at Raba Village, Sokoto, northwestern Nigeria. His father was a district head and heir apparent to the Sultanate throne from the house of Usmanu Dan Fodio, a religious and social reformer who brought the Habib dynasty under the Fulani Caliphate in the beginning of the 19th century. Ahmadu Bello raised the bar of political consciousness in participation when, in 1944, he engineered the establishment of the Northern People's Congress (NPC) as the first political party in northern Nigeria and the rallying point for politicians in the region before independence. History will not forget Ahmadu Bello for his charisma and political sagacity, which provided easy passage for his kinsmen to assume political and administrative positions in Nigeria's post-independence era. The distinguished elder statesman and Sardauna of Sokoto has his face on his country's 200 naira currency as a mark of honor to one of the architects of Nigeria's independence. Western Spring Television identifies Ahmadu Bello as a watershed character in history. Samuel Ladoke Akintola was a frontal figure in the historical moves that birthed an independent Nigeria from colonial Britain. As a freedom activist, he deployed his wits, energy, intellect, and oratory skills to prepare the grounds for constitutional talks that eventually culminated in the country's independence in 1960. The 13th Ààrẹ Ọ̀nà Kakanfò of Yoruba land cut his teeth as a politician when he became a foundation member of Action Group, the dominant political party in the Western region, and was elected the party's parliamentary leader of opposition at the Federal House of Representatives. The crisis in the Action Group, which pitched Samuel Ladoke Akintola against his leader, was not only a sore point in his colorful political life, but a reversal of gains which characterized the exemplary leadership of Awolowo Akintola premiership. 23 years after his death, Oyo State University of Technology Ogbomosho was renamed Samuel Ladoke Akintola University of Technology to keep his memory alive. Western Spring Television identifies Samuel Ladoke Akintola as a major character in history. Aminatu, the legendary queen of Zazzau, is best known to historians as Queen Amina of Zaria, an old walled town and capital of the Hausa state of Zazzau. Amina was a great warrior and the first woman to rule the ancient kingdom of Zazzau. Her 34 years as queen witnessed an unprecedented expansion of Zazzau by conquests. Queen Amina of Zaria belongs to the class of Amazons by the might of her army and her strings of conquests. She opened Zaria to trans-border trade and was said to have initiated kola nut cultivation in the ancient kingdom. The Hausa Muslim figure was born in 1533 and died in 1610 at the age of 77 years. Folklores remember Aminatu, the queen of Zazzau, as a brave, smart and talented leader whose giant statue now adorns the National Arts Theatre in Lagos, Nigeria, while many educational institutions bear her name. Western Spring Television identifies Queen Amina as a watershed character in history. "21 years after World War I, the world was again thrown into the horror of another war. In September 1939, vast majority of nations across the world, including the great powers, took up arms against themselves, from which emerged two opposing military powers. Between 40 and 80 million human souls perished in the 6-year war spread across Soviet Union, Germany, Poland, Japan, Yugoslavia, the Dutch and East Indies. The casualty figures did not include the 6 million Jews that were gassed to death on the orders of Adolf Hitler at various Nazi camps. It must be stated here that the United States of America played a dominant role in World War II, but the three Allied powers played roles that ended in victory over Germany. Britain's most significant contribution to the cause of World War II was her survival of Adolf Hitler's Armada in 1940. Western Spring Television identifies World War II as a watershed event in history.
Arrested, affected, sound, found. What do we see? What do we say? Flowing from a spring. A fact A to Z. Check and confirm. Ever expounding current events. Traveling down from the business gist to the globally arising happenings, to the sports news, to the bittersweet infos. Guided transmission, even diffusion, vast and fast, detailed facts are fled. Within seconds, nuggets of words that flew across borders are fired. Stories short and long, wrapped in bundles of words, broken and dissected as it is, except misheard. This is the news as it is.
ọ̀pọ̀lọpọ̀ nǹkan ló ń kojú àwọn ará àdúgbò, àwọn ará àwùjọ tí ohun ò dẹ̀ dókè. Ọ̀pọ̀lọpọ̀ ìnira, ọ̀pọ̀lọpọ̀ ìyà làwọn èèyàn ń kojú rẹ̀ ní àdúgbò. Ojú ọ̀nà tó kù díẹ̀ káàtó, iná ọba.
The name Adolf Hitler exudes a gale of bile from millions of people who were victims of his autocratic rule and love, from fanatical supporters of his imperial aggression. Born April 20, 1889, at a small Austrian town sandwiched between Austro-German frontier, Adolf Hitler spent most of his childhood in Linz, the capital of Upper Austria. As a very prominent stakeholder in the horrific events of conflicts in Europe, Adolf Hitler could simply go off as the sole mover of the Second World War. 40 million Jews were murdered in the gas chambers of various Nazi camps on the orders of Adolf Hitler. Thousands of Adolf Hitlers still live in Germany today, but the majority of them are elderly and were named before the end of the Second World War. As the name pales into vanishing rarity, 13 children according to official records were named Adolf Hitler between 2006 and 2013. Western Spring Television identifies Adolf Hitler as a major character in history. Gbadamosi Adegoke Adelabu was a prominent figure in Ibadan politics and Western region before Nigeria's independence. He was a key founder of the National Council of Nigeria and the Cameroons, a political party that held lofty the torch of liberty for the two West African countries. He carved a niche for himself as a wordsmith and a creative speaker. The nickname Kwenkele was a natively corrupted version of Peculiar Mess, his bombastic English language style often used to score proceedings at the parliament. The author of Africa in Ebullition, a handbook of freedom for Nigerian nationalists, was Nigeria's Federal Minister of Natural Resources and Social Services between 1955 and 1956. He died in an auto crash on the 25th March 1958 at the age of 42. Western Spring Television identifies Adegoke Adelabu as a watershed character in history. Born Jeremiah Oyeni Obafemi on March 6, 1905. Obafemi Awolowo was a prime architect of Nigeria's independence and most consummate advocate of free education and social welfare in Africa's most populous nation. Erudite politician, thinker and philosopher, Awo was fondly addressed by associates and political colleagues, brought his unique attributes to bear on governance in the defunct Western region. He administered as leader of government business and the premier between 1955 and 1958. Obafemi Awolowo's premiership witnessed pioneering in multi-sectoral policy initiatives and execution. The Western region under his administration paraded several enviable records. First television station in Africa, first real estate in Nigeria, first high-rise building in Nigeria, first modern sports stadium in Nigeria, first agricultural settlement in Nigeria, first modern civil service secretariat in Nigeria, and first industrial estate in Nigeria. His face is on 100 naira denomination as a mark of honor for his distinguished services to his country. Western Spring Television identifies Obafemi Awolowo as a major character in history. Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela was an anti-apartheid activist who gave his all for the elimination of what has been described as the world's most vicious rule of the unjust and man's inhumanity against man. He was born July 18, 1918 in Mvezo, South Africa. Educated and trained as a successful legal practitioner, he took up the gauntlet of a human activist against segregation by the minority white suprematists in South Africa. At the climax of his trial for treason, orchestrated by the minority South African government, the great crusader for democratic equality was prepared to pay the supreme sacrifice to establish majority rule in his native land. He told white jurists that if achieving freedom for his people was worth his life, he was prepared to die. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in Robben Island, described as the most notorious prison in the world. It was from this same prison that he came out as a free man to assume office as South Africa's first black president in 1994. Western Spring Television identifies Nelson Mandela as a watershed character in history. James Ajibolaige was a lawyer who obtained his first degree in classics from Nigeria's premier University of Ibadan. Born September 13, 1930, the orator and the polyglot spoke impeccable English, French, Igbo, Hausa, and Yoruba languages. His fine diction placed him among classical orators and public speakers like Cicero, the Roman orator. This attribute earned him the prefix Cicero of Esauke. He authored Kaduna Boy, an autobiography, Detainee's Diary, Constitution, and The People, among 6 other books. Bolaige was a colorful politician, elected governor Oyo State in 1979 and appointed a federal minister in 1999. He was a pioneer founder of Afenifere, the Yoruba social, cultural, and political group. he invested his political sagacity to propel the group to the height of political leadership and decision-making in the southwest of Nigeria. Bola Ige was assassinated on the 23rd December 2001. His murderers are yet to be apprehended till today. Western Spring Television identifies Bola Ige as a watershed character in history. Ahmadu Bello, a Prince Royal, was born 6th of December 1910 at Raba Village, Sokoto, northwestern Nigeria. His father was a district head and heir apparent to the Sultanate throne from the house of Usmanu Danfodio, a religious and social reformer who brought the Habib dynasty under the Fulani Caliphate in the beginning of the 19th century. Ahmadu Bello raised the bar of political consciousness in participation when, in 1944, he engineered the establishment of the Northern People's Congress (NPC) as the first political party in northern Nigeria and the rallying point for politicians in the region before independence. History will not forget Ahmadu Bello for his charisma and political sagacity, which provided easy passage for his kinsmen to assume political and administrative positions in Nigeria's post-independence era. The distinguished elder statesman and Sardauna of Sokoto has his face on his country's 200 naira currency as a mark of honor to one of the architects of Nigeria's independence. Western Spring Television identifies Ahmadu Bello as a watershed character in history. Samuel Laduke Akintola was a frontal figure in the historical moves that birthed an independent Nigeria from colonial Britain. As a freedom activist, he deployed his wits, energy, intellect, and oratory skills to prepare the ground. "21 years after World War I, the world was again thrown into the horror of another war. In September 1939, vast majority of nations across the world, including the great powers, took up arms against themselves, from which emerged two opposing military powers. Between 40 and 80 million human souls perished in the 6-year war spread across Soviet Union."
All right, welcome back to the show. It's still Morning Spring on Western Spring Television. Thank you for staying with us through the break. Now we're back to have our discussion this morning, and we're looking at a topical issue surrounding politics. We're joined live by the caretaker chairman of the PDP in Katsina State, Dr. Abdurrahman Usman, live via Zoom on the show this morning. Thank you, Dr. Usman, for joining us.
Thank you, Femi, for having me on. Good morning, listeners.
Oh, okay, so this is Emmanuel. Femi is unavoidably absent in the studio this morning.
Okay.
Okay, so now let me just ask you, how is the PDP in Katsina in the first place? Do your performance in the presidential election, were you satisfied with it?
Well, as you can see, whenever any political party decides to dissolve the leadership of the party right from the ward to the state level, it's an indication that there is a problem. And when you juxtapose the performance of the party in the presidential election and National Assembly elections compared to the gubernatorial and State House of Assembly, it really gives it away that there's a problem on the ground. We had issues of people who did anti-party, a very serious crime, and people who had benefited from the PDP, people who the PDP had made from nothing to become something. So, and any serious political party will not fold its arms and allow things to continue to go awry. And the fact that we had this dissolution of ESCO tells you that some of the party leaders across board were involved. So the National Working Committee of our great party, after examining the whole issues and even based on complaints from genuine critical stakeholders, loyal members of the party from Katsina State, had to act in order to rescue the party from falling into doldrums. Thus, the constitution of the Caretaker Committee, which is headed by my humble self, with other members drawn from across various divides in the state and from outside.
All right, Dr. Usman, just yesterday, the President Muhammadu Buhari, who is from Katsina, was quoted as saying that the PDP lost the election because of overconfidence. What's your reaction to that? Was it overconfidence that cost you the election?
I don't agree. I was a critical member of the electoral process, particularly in preparations for the elections. I was a critical member of the Election Management Committee in Kaduna State and even across the Northwestern zone. We had a series of preparations, trainings, For the first time in the history of the PDP, we trained our polling agents. Over 200,000 agents were trained, and we strategized. We deployed men, material, and resources. But as the case may be, the fact is that the PDP went into an election against the APC and INEC. There was collaboration between INEC and the APC. First of all, I wish to refresh your memory that the INEC chairman, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, severally swore and told Nigerians that results will be uploaded at the polling units simultaneously as they have been declared. We all know what happened to that. It's no longer history. It's not history. They did not keep to their words. So it's very disgraceful that after spending so much billions of naira, which we expected that will have credible improvements from the point at which Professor Jega left INEC, Yakubu has bastardized the system. Today, INEC is budgeting over 300 billion naira on litigations. Why? It tells you a lot is wrong. And from the way INEC is even trying to defend the mandate, the stolen mandate that it has given to Tinubu and Obasani in Kaduna State. Particularly, I wish to refresh your memory that here in Kaduna, the gubernatorial candidate of the APC was even known to have been dodging receiving the summons from the court. So if you believe you want a mandate fair and square, why shouldn't you be confident of defending it? Everybody knew what happened. So there are several cases of vote padding. There are several cases of cancellations, corrections, and what have you. So we really have a very critical, a very serious problem with INEC. I believe, I hope for the short while that Tinubu will be in the villa before His Excellency Atiku Abubakar reclaims the mandate. I hope he can be humble enough, like late President Yaradua of blessed memory, and accept that the elections that gave him this victory was seriously flawed, and try to do a number of things to ensure that we sanitize the electoral system. I wish that the incoming members of the National Assembly will quickly review our Electoral Act and make it such that elections should be conducted at least a year before the expiration of tenure of any political office holder, so that all court cases will be concluded before the swearing in. You know, Jagaban has a lot of issues, in fact, so uncountable. We have the issue of double registration, double nomination by his deputy. And for the first time in the history of Nigeria, our judiciary owes it to Nigerians to prove that they are truly independent and to prove that they are truly the last hope of the common man. Though unfortunately, in the recent past, we have witnessed a lot of very sad developments, particularly at the Supreme Court level. If you may recall the issue of Ahmed Lawan as it is, which is one very common case that is being cited everywhere, in which the Supreme Court has failed to maintain that reputation of standing on previous judgments or authorities as fashioned out by it. We hope that this time around, the issue of the double nomination of Kasim Shettima will be treated the same way as it was done in the case of Bayelsa, in the case of David Lam. We hope the Supreme Court justices will not speak from both sides of their mouth. We hope they will have that honor and integrity which we believe they have, or which we believe they should try to recover, because that honor and integrity has been largely, tainted by recent judgments on political matters by their lordships.
Okay, so you've spoken extensively about the conduct of the election. Now let's look at Adamawa State for a case study. Candidate of your party, Amadou Fintiri, was declared winner of that election. It was a controversial election, from being inconclusive earlier in the year to the 15th of this month, where supplementary elections held and the results were declared. Now, how do you assess what happened there, especially with INEC and the REC, Hudu Unisari making some fundamental errors there, and then INEC coming back to conclude the process and declaring a winner? What are your takeaways from that incident?
Well, the fact is that in the first instance, several attempts were made to work to an answer to produce Binani as the duly elected governor of Adamawa State, because I'm aware that various cancellations were made so as to make that election inconclusive. But the good people of Adamawa State stood by our candidates and their resolve to ensure that the Broom Party has no window to rig themselves in. Hudu was only playing a script. There are several people behind it. You can see the situation in which all the security agencies were compromised. We have not heard of what disciplinary measures or what is happening in terms of the Commissioner of Police, the Director of the DSS, the Director of the Civil Defense in the state being, summoned and put on, internal scrutiny as to why they did so compromise, because they all know the law that the resident electoral commissioner is not and never the returning officer as provided for in the law. So in the first instance, they had no business even being there. But you can see even when our returning officer, E.D. Hong, tried to question what Hudu was about to do, the CP was very much on the ground supporting Hudu, gave him all the cover to carry out the shenanigans that he did. So I wish to say that, be that as it may, largely it was a grand conspiracy by both certain people in high places in INEC, and we have been told that even certain cabals within the very top echelons of government are behind it all. Because how can you tell me that Hudu just disappeared? How can you tell me that Hudu was suddenly flown with a private jet outside Yola and he got to Abuja and he became invisible? Is he so tiny, or is he so a small molecule that you say a man just disappeared like that? For a person like of that at that time, with view of what he had done, ordinarily we expect all eyes of the security agencies to be on him. And as of today, I'm not aware that Binani had been questioned for making an acceptance speech. I'm not aware too that the NBC has sanctioned the NTA for even carrying that acceptance speech. If that speech had been taken by channels, or perhaps by AIT especially, I believe by now the government-led NBC will have slammed a serious fine of 10 million naira or so on the TV station. So how do you talk of fairness within the system when you look at all these issues as they are? It's a very sad development that the only legacy we are looking at President Buhari could leave Nigerians with, which will have been a cleanup of the electoral system. Today, that opportunity, he has lost it.
Okay, so before we let you go, now I'll take you outside of politics now. President Buhari said he was going to take off fuel subsidy. We even took an $800 million palliative from the World Bank to cushion the effects of removal of fuel subsidy. But yesterday there was a reversal of that trend. Now, how do we move on from there? Do we return the money we took from the World Bank?
This government has a very wet appetite for taking loans left, right, and center, and with nothing much to show for it. You see, in the first instance, my expectation was that when this government came in, against the backdrop of the various promises which Mr. President made, you want to, evaluate or assess the success or failures of this government. You start from the point of the promises made by President Buhari. Unfortunately, I was a foundation member of the APC. I was there at the trade fair when he raised a sachet of spaghetti, which then was selling at 15 naira, and was weeping crocodile tears that his love for the common man and his pity for the common man. But where are we today when you look at the prices of food items as they are? At that time when he came in, the price of a bag of rice was just about 7,000 naira. Today, that is foreign rice. Today, local bag of local rice is going for about 40,000 naira. The spaghetti that was about 2008 today is going for 7,000 to 9,000 naira. The fuel, which he said, and he led a protest against increment of price, which was less than 100 naira when he came in. Today, we are buying fuel at about 210, 240, and even 300 naira per liter. I expect the serious government, when they came in, to have done a thorough audit of what is the level of fuel consumption by Nigerians. They failed to do it. And the former Minister of Petroleum, which President Buhari was, unfortunately, under his leadership as current Minister of Petroleum, never in the history of Nigeria, the crude oil theft, the losses which we are incurring in terms of crude that is being siphoned illegally, far outstrips the streams of income into government treasury. So, and yet we have the security forces, we had everything and what have you. What is the state of our refineries today? Are they any better from what they were when he came in? One would have expected a serious government to have ensured that a lot of modular refineries have been encouraged. We have expected that by now the refineries will have, been revamped 100% production. Those are the things that needed to have been put in place before you talk of removing fuel subsidy. Make sure that we don't import fuel. We produce fuel locally and even export. But that had never been the priority of General Buhari. It seems that he has lost it all because General Buhari was never really in charge. Remember the appointment of Abba Kyari, his late chief of staff of blessed memory, as a member of the board of NNPC, which he approved and signed without even knowing that he had done that. It tells you a lot of things are wrong with this government. You can see how he gave a lot of priority to developing the Niger Republic and even parts of Nigeria. Well, little wonder we heard that he's saying that he may even relocate to Niger. Well, I don't want to say it all, but probably the issue of dual citizenship as it may be.
All right, so thank you very much for your time, Dr. Abdurrahman Usman Keteka, Chairman of the PDP in Katsina State. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you, it's my pleasure.
You have a lovely day. Okay, so that's the interview segment. I'll be back to take you on the TGIF edition of Spring Trends. To stay with us.